It's fine. I'm easy. Didn't realize it might be.
Good afternoon. This is the time and place for the Legal and Finance Committee meeting for City of Rapid City, May 29, 2024. We'll begin with a roll call and determination of quorum.
Beaverdorf. Here. Evans. Here. Maher. Here. Seacrest. Here.
Here. Next item is the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion by Seacrest and a second by Evans to adopt the agenda. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Now is the time for general public comment. This is a time for the members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. I don't see any speaker request forms, so I'm going to close general public comment. And the next thing we're going to do, I guess, is a presentation and update on airport construction by Mead and Hunt Senior Aviation Advisor Tom Schauer and our own Airport Executive Director Patrick Dame. And I see he moved himself up on the earlier part of the agenda as opposed to yesterday's.
I was expecting the end.
Oh, go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to get up and speak here. And if for those of you who watched it yesterday, it'll probably be a repeat of yesterday, but bear with us, we'll get through it. So we wanted to take an opportunity, again, sometimes ensuring that we're briefing and rebriefing and making sure that everybody is kind of understanding of the project, the whys. We wanted to get in front of the council again and continue the discussion through this. Part of what we'll go through, and Tom Schauer is with me with Mead and Hunt, is we'll start out just kind of talking about the reasons for the project. I'll have Tom go through some of the funding challenges towards the latter half of the conversation. Then we've just got some pictures of where construction is as of today. So based on the reasons for the project, as we look at where the airport is located, we're relatively isolated, Denver being 6 hours to our south, our biggest airport, and then Sioux Falls really being our biggest competition to the east, being 4.5 hours. Really, we cover western South Dakota, parts of eastern Montana and Wyoming, through there, so we do have a rather large catchment area. And between us and Sioux Falls, we make up 94% of the total air service traffic for all of South Dakota. Our recent growth, passenger numbers, 2023 was a record at 352,000 passengers. 2024 is on pace to also be a record. Right now, we're seeing on average, so far for the year, we're up 24%. In our most recent capacity report that I got yesterday, we show that our seats are going to be up in June, 24.3%, in July, 22.8%, in August, 33.8%. So you can see we're carrying well above what will probably carry that 24% increase likely through the end of the year. So what is that going to mean for us? That means we're going to go from about 350,000 passengers this year to close to 400,000. So that's a pretty substantial increase in a one-year period. We've got current airlines, Allegiant, American, Delta, United, and Sun Country will be coming back online within a couple weeks here. Nonstop destinations, you can see there with 11 nonstops and 4 of them being seasonal. Economic impact, we just completed an economic impact last year. It was based on the numbers from the year prior, which were about 330,000 passenger enplanements. Based on that, total economic impact was $455 million for the yearly impact. Tax revenues of $2.2 million for Pennington County and $15.5 million for the state of South Dakota. 52% of the passengers are coming for leisure and business travel through there. I don't think that's a big surprise to anybody there. You can kind of see the other information associated with how they calculated the economic impact, and I've left the economic impact flyer on the dais for you. So as we look at passenger enplanement growth, when you look at between 2014 and 2023, we've seen a 40% growth in passengers within there. We did have a dip in COVID, which is pretty obvious through there. We are catching back up with the numbers, which are the FAA's terminal area plan is the line in yellow. So we are on track with where we're going to be, and much like I said, we expect 2024 to hit 400,000. We're probably going to track on that almost identically to how that line goes, and then we think it's going to go into a relatively stable growth from that point forward. Now understand the Federal Aviation Administration's terminal area forecast, or the TAF, is a relatively conservative set of numbers. So just looking at that, when we go out to the 2033 timeframe, being close to 500,000, that is a fairly conservative estimate without a lot of strong growth. When you look at the chart on the right, shows monthly how we go through on a monthly basis. We're very much have a lot of our traffic during the summer months, 63% coming May to October, so you can see the peaking in there. We've had a very good January through March, and we've been carrying ahead of the trend lines that have been there in previous years. So again, if that keeps up, we will have a great year. But the one thing that I would point out on there, and that I didn't mention yesterday, is when the year we hit 50,000 in July, we were very much at the extent of the abilities of the TSA checkpoint to be able to process people through on time to make their flight. We had basically TV screens out there telling people when they arrive, make sure you get back to the airport 2 hours in advance to be able to get through the TSA checkpoint, so they knew ahead of time they're going to need more time. This year, when you start to look at July and August being up 22.8 and 33.8%, we're really actually going to push the capabilities of what the facility has this go around. And that was, as I talked through this yesterday, that was one of the things that I noticed. When you look at that 50,000 and knowing how much of a struggle we had that month, we're going to see that again this summer. Potentially is going to be the one to have the biggest struggle we've ever had. So part of the things in the trends in the industry is for the why, we need to look at this. Airplane size is getting bigger. So if you remember back when the terminal was built, it was fairly key-shaped. We've done some infill development for Gate 1 and Gate 2 to widen those areas to allow them to get jet bridges. We used to have Saab 340s, Dash 8s, and DC-9s coming into here. They were able to park along the bulb end of the terminal at that time before we infilled them in. And those airplanes typically were anywhere from 50 to 76 seat airplanes, the Saabs even being smaller than that, up to 100 to 125 seats with the DC-9s. Now we're seeing 737s with seating configurations up to 188 passengers. So hold rooms that were designed to basically hold a 50-seat regional jet now are having to hold well over 100 people in those particular areas. So the seating area, the terminal, and just the capacity overall is cramped. So based on that change, we're seeing that dynamic change in the industry. We're also seeing issue with wingspans because, again, when you got the wingspans next to each other at the parking area of the aircraft, that does make us fairly space constrained. And one of our 7 gates that we've got today does not allow for aircraft of that size. It's primarily for that 50 to 70 seat aircraft. So part of what I alluded to earlier with people getting through the checkpoint, you're only as good as the amount of people you can process through to get them to their flight on time in the time at which they arrive. Airlines tend to want to fly to your airport and out of your airport when they can get to their bank time where they can be most competitive against each other to get people to other destinations. So if you notice, a lot of the carriers tend to come in and leave all at the same time. So if we have, we will have times of the day where the terminal is empty. We'll have times of the day when you can't find a place to sit, and it's the peaking that goes in there. The place right now that's most subject to the peaking on that is the TSA checkpoint, because when people think they can get to our airport an hour in advance and make their flight, and they're 200 deep in line to try and get through the checkpoint, there's possibilities that they can miss their flights. So, our inability to process through our small checkpoint today, but then the other issue is the checkpoint's built on a slope. It's about an 18-inch slope, and our new TSA equipment is not able to tolerate that slope. It won't function on it. We were supposed to get new equipment 2 years ago. That got sent somewhere else. So there isn't a solution for that right now. So that's part of the basis for Project One, is to solve that issue, but then also solve some of the safety related issues that we have with a lot of the manual related work that's going on in the back of house areas where you as a customer don't see where they're processing the baggage. A lot of the stuff is having to be done manually because it's very segregated. Each airline has their own specific area. We have TSA screening equipment behind the ticket counters. They were never dealt with post 9/11. So we have 3 baggage screening devices. United and Delta each have their own, and then American, Sun Country, and Allegiant all split one device, and that's fine for the ones that have their own. But when you've got 3 of them trying to put bag carts around one linear bag belt, it causes an issue. The other issue that we have is there's no carousel that can spit out onto the back of house that can take a number of bags. It's only a linear bag belt that can hold about 15 bags in any one line. So if no one's there in the back pulling them off, it stops screening behind the ticket counters. So that causes a bag backup up in the ticket counter area. The final piece of this is there's no ability for them to gain more ticket counter space. If you go into most airports, you see a long line of ticket counters that you can freely move in between, and there's TV screens behind, and they can expand and contract their operation based on what it is that they need. Within ours, each has their cubby space, and they're basically limited to that amount of space. So you will end up in times, if you see in this picture over here, where you've got long lines of people waiting to get in, where in this case, United, if they were able to gain more ticket counters, could expand the need or expand their check-in operation that's there. In the back of house, this is United's back area. They push these bag carts back into place, they load them, and then they pull them out by hand. This is the linear bag belt that I'm talking about. The example is Bismarck over here on the left, which is a little bit bigger than half our size. They've got a linear bag belt in there. The Minot terminal, which they are more than half or less than half our size, they've got dual bag carousel belts in the back to be able to pull off of. The other side of it is they're able to pull right off and put right into a cart and not having to haul the bags longer distances. United will have bag carts lined out the door, and they'll be carrying from this bag belt clear through this garage, another garage area to the outside to put in the bag carts. Again, existing example, future example. Now through the project, knowing that the project has come in over budget right out the bid, the initial bid, we've made some changes. We got rid of the Gate 1 addition, which was in Project 1. Would have allowed for more seating in Gate 1. That also had a mechanical room underneath it. Based on that, we moved the mechanical room into this space here. And we also we were going to have the bag screening devices here. We had to move those up into this area and create a mini inline baggage system. But this gets all of our screening devices in one area and still will meet the needs that we've got through the process. So we did make some positive changes in this. The other thing we looked at is with the seating in Gate Area 1. We know that once we build the second project, which is the gate expansion, and add some gates in there, we can demolish some of the concession space and gain additional seating for Gate 1 and 2 in that concession space. So we found a reason, or we found an ability to make some changes, but then not have it have a major impact on the project. Up above that area, again, the TSA checkpoint being a slope, We've constructed a flat space here, which will accommodate 5 screening lanes. Currently today, we really have 1.5. We're supposed to have 3. We would open this area with 3, with the ability to add 2 more into the future, which should meet the plan. But because we've got an exterior wall on this and not a lot of ability to expand once it's built the first time, we wanted to make sure this was sized appropriately to meet future needs. Then we have a reincorporation slope on the back side of this that comes back down to the height of the gate area. Just some visuals of that. Visuals of Project 2. I haven't talked a lot about Project 2 in this, but the one thing to consider is Project 1 really is just the ability to process passengers and baggage. It really doesn't give us any way to make more money for the airport. It just gives us the ability to have the power needs, the bag processing needs, and the TSA screening needs to get really where we should be today to be functional, and then give us some space to expand a bit into the future. Project 2, the gate area expansion, being considered Project 2, is the time where we'll actually be able to expand the capabilities of the airport to take more airlines, take more flights, and have more at the gates than we have today. Project 1 is actually reducing our parking spaces down from 9 aircraft parking spaces down to 8. Project 3, right now, Project 3 is not being considered. We've actually stopped design on Project 3 because of looking at costs and our ability to be able to get there within the foreseeable future. That would expand the car rental business, which is our second largest business on the airport, and would add a second carousel belt. That also has the area where we were going to move our offices to, so we've modified Project 1 to build some walls within our existing office to allow entrance to the checkpoint through our existing office space. This is, again, some renderings of Project 2, or 3, sorry. With that, I'll bring Tom Schauer up to make some additional comments.
Thanks, Patrick. As Patrick went through, we've come a long ways. We've gone through the design of Project 1 and 2. What's the path forward? How do we keep moving this project forward so we get you a facility that will fill your needs for the future? Things that we're doing is we are continuously working with the FAA. We're continuously working with the congressional delegates at a state and federal level, trying to maximize any funding opportunities at a state and federal level. This is one of the things we're seeing in the country is this problem. The federal funding has not gone up notably for 20-some years, and project costs have roughly gone up, whether it's a terminal building or a runway, have gone up about 4 times. So as you can imagine, the competition for funding is tough. So we've had numerous trips to DC, more or less advocating for the project with both congressional delegates and FAA leadership. And we're seeing some progress in that. The Rapid City area has seen, right now, we just announced or heard announcement in the last couple months of $20 million of a congressionally directed spending. We got an additional 11 point some million in additional funding last year. So as we go through this is one of our efforts, is to continuously beat that drum, highlight the importance of this project, the importance of it to the community. And this is one of the things as we look at and keep you as a city leadership involved, is it is really important for you to be engaged and involved at the levels that you can, and your financial involvement is going to be critical to this as well. This is why anything you need for briefings and things like that, Patrick and his team or ourselves will continue to work with you guys on that. But these are our plans forward, is to keep the community, the public, the political players, and the funding agencies aware of what's going on and the importance of that. Things that we also do is reduce and are looking for ways to continuously reduce project costs. Patrick talked about Gate 1. We're looking at some of the things that we put into any plan is the ability to phase effectively. Sometimes if you don't have the money to do that, you look at ways of, well, okay, people are just going to be impacted more during construction. They're just going to have to tolerate that. Some of those benefits come with costs. Well, if we don't have the money, we're reducing those items. So we're continuously looking for those. We're looking for opportunities to break the project into smaller pieces, and I'll touch a little bit on the importance of that in a little bit here. A little bit of update on the project as it stands. Last year bids came in, they were about $76 million. That was about 20 million over estimates. Sad news is, as we see that across the country, bid prices are getting just a lot of inflation, a lot of increased cost for a variety of reasons. So we went forward with what we're kind of referring to as almost like a warm shell of the building to keep this project moving, to utilize the federal funds that were available. So we've done that. You see up there the remaining cost is roughly about 47 million. We're working on a variety of phasing and pieces of that to utilize some of the money I talked a little bit about, the 20 million that was announced for the congressionally directed spending. If any of you have the opportunity to talk with Senator Round's office or Senator Thune's office or your congressman's office, please thank them for their efforts. Every little bit helps. They have been great to work with. They're doing what they can to help. So all that is a huge effort that helps us all. In addition to that, we get entitlements on a regular basis. The airport gets that based on the number of enplanements they have. In addition to that, there's some additional bipartisan infrastructure law funding that the airport will continue to get through 26. We're utilizing those fundings, and you'll see that up there at about 10.8 million is those numbers. One last thing, Patrick, really the effort was led by Patrick Dame out of your community and Dan Letlier out of Sioux Falls to work with the congressional delegates at a state level and a local level with David Johnson and company to push for state funding. The state announced or awarded $10 million that can be used for terminal projects. We're working on the application for that. Our hope is that we will be somewhere in that 5 million or a little bit above of that 10 million. But there's no promises. It's a competitive process like everything else. But we have briefed the state aeronautics and the state DOT several times on the project. Again, our effort is to make sure that everybody knows the importance of this project. So as we go through this next page, which we hope, I think bids come in good. Local funds on that would be roughly about $11.8 million. And that's where that project sits today. I have a little photo on here at the end just to kind of give you a ballpark what's going on. Patrick talked a little bit about challenges. Been doing this, for some of you who know me, I've been around for 30-some years. I used to be the head of the FAA for North Dakota and South Dakota and doing airport development. Switched over to the dark side and been a consultant now for about 12 years. One of the things with projects of this magnitude is we'd all like to have a clear path to the end. The problem is the federal government, who's the largest funding agency, allocates their funding, like most governmental entities, 1 year at a time. You also have the state that does the same thing, and locally. So when we look at a mammoth project of this magnitude, we get to see a picture of funding 1 year at a time, and no one guarantees what that looks like till the last second. So when I talked a little about breaking the project into smaller pieces, things we do is have those smaller pieces so we can quickly right-size the project to the availability of funds. This makes it a little inefficient, a little more costly, but that's kind of the nature of the beast that they're in right now. And so these are kind of some of the weird things that we're dealing with. They also, with bill funding, there's been supplemental funding, there's been all these different things, all have different rules. So the complexity of where you can put that funding is a big issue. On terminal buildings, the FAA views the project kind of in the sense of safety first, and then it goes down. Terminals are relatively a lower priority, and there's large portions of a terminal building that are not even eligible for federal funding. So for the most part, when you walk through a terminal, the areas you can't walk to that have security stopping you is ineligible. So like Patrick talked about the baggage and different things like that. The traditional airport improvement program funding does not fund that back of house. They will fund the baggage carousel for whatever reason, but that whole space back there is not eligible for AIP. So there's a lot of rules like that that does put a bigger onus on the state and the local. And that's one of the reasons Patrick and his team worked heavily with the state, is to get the state more involved to help in those areas that the federal government doesn't help. So those are things that are going on. We also hear in our big proponents of making sure we buy American. Buy American is a great thing, but it also puts limitations on competition and drives project costs. You also have to document how you meet that, so it scares off some competitors. So Buy American, then we also have the Buy America, Build America, which just came out of the Bill Act, and then we have like Davis-Bacon. Great programs, they just drive costs. So those are things that are going on. The state government will continue to work with them, hoping to garner more and more state support, trying to help them recognize the importance of aviation to the state of South Dakota, aviation to the Rapid City community and the Black Hills. As Patrick said, between Sioux Falls and Rapid City, you're at roughly 95% of the traffic across the state. So it's a huge footprint. So those are things we're working with your leadership at the airport, trying to maximize the opportunity for funding to make this project go as fast and as far as we can to make sure we meet your needs for the future. Having said that, here is just a snapshot from the 16th. I realize they've come a long ways since there, so it's kind of interesting what you can see in the background. That flat area that's the TSA checkpoints is just beyond the jet bridge. They're putting up all their footings in and things like that and are continuing to go. If you get an opportunity to go out to the airport and coordinate with Patrick and his team, they'd love to give you a little tour and show you what's going on. But this is what's going on to date. Having said that, appreciate your time, and we'll open it up for questions.
I guess I would add one more thing too. Councilmember Ham did ask me a question yesterday about projected revenue and projected economic development. I am working on that already. So expect to see something from me in the coming week. That'll be in the form of a few simple graphs to show you what we see projections based on airport revenue growth through there, but then also economic development growth based on a passenger basis for what we see coming in the future.
Thank you both. Go to Councilman Evans.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions, my own curiosity. I see that Bismarck, Minot, they already have this linear belt system in place, correct? Yet they're, they don't have as many employments as we do. I know back when the terminal opened in the 80s or whenever it was, we were very proud of that. Now, I'm sure there's been changes in how things are done over the years, but how is it that the funding became available for places like Bismarck and Minot to get this done and we don't? Is it because that we're a very highway-centric state and they don't get much state support? Is it because we were early to the lunch in terms of building a terminal right before things changed? Or how do we get behind the curve on this?
It's a great question. It's been interesting because a lot of people built terminals back in the 60s and 70s, and through just the cycle, they've really been coming up to be reconstructed. Bismarck was actually in the middle of design. I was part of the Bismarck project from the FAA standpoint, and they were started in the middle of design right as 9/11 happened. So when that was done, all of a sudden we had to incorporate how baggage screening would be done. So it's kind of just a fraction of when it happened. The Bismarck terminal, just to show you the cost increase in terminals, I believe their terminal cost around $10 million. If we built that today, it would be $70 to $80 million. Prices are literally 4 times as high. And so that's where Bismarck, Minot's terminal was done on the cusp of the oil boom in North Dakota. And so theirs was before a lot of the big increase. And I'm trying to think what their number off the top of my head. I want to say their terminal was like $90 million, and that was a brand new terminal, and replaced one that was notably smaller. And they were doing it right in the middle of the oil boom. The amount of tax revenues coming into the state of North Dakota during that revenue boom was incredible. I was involved in the new Williston Airport and things like that. I mean, we're just talking, the oil industry when it goes off is just a massive amount of money and things happening in a confined area. Fortunate timing on their part. As you look at right now, Fargo, Sioux Falls, Dickinson, Rapid City are all running, and Bismarck is actually going through an expansion. They're doing the planning process. They're like 3 years behind where you're at right now for an expansion. They'll be seeing the same issues. However, back then, that transition to baggage carousels and how you better, more efficiently move bags was understood back where Rapid hasn't done a major terminal project to fix back a house since it was developed that I know of.
Is part of our problem also that we don't get a lot of funding from the Department of Transportation, say that the level of North Dakota does? Is that, or am I mistaken on that?
North Dakota, when the oil boom came into play, there was a concerted effort by airports, the North Dakota Aeronautics, to highlight the importance of aviation and get state funding. That has been led and continued to grow over the years. And the oil revenues, I believe, have allowed North Dakota a much bigger opportunity to fund those. I have a meeting tomorrow on about $120 million ask for airport development. So there's just a bigger amount of resources put in there. On a regular basis, North Dakota puts in about $20 million a biennium, so $10 million a year. That's pretty notably larger than South Dakota. Budgets are different, beliefs are different. So that's one of those things that understanding aviation and the importance of it, as I always said, people that come into your community that are going to put a huge development up didn't drive here. They flew in on their personal jets. They're looking for ways that their staff, if you're going to put up a big facility, how is their staff's quality of life going to be? And if you talk to your economic development team, they'll talk to you more about it than I can ever tell you. But the quality of life is how do you get out? How do you go out and do vacations? Is it cost effective? Can we get in and out? Can family come to visit? All that goes back to your airport. And you guys are one of the few airports in the upper Midwest that actually has a tourism draw of significance. So those are revenues that come straight into yours. So our fear is, and Patrick and I have this conversation a lot, is if you don't resolve your capacity issues, airlines are great at doing dynamic forecasting and dynamic pricing. Guess what? Planes are full, they can charge you more. If you charge more, well, you don't travel as much, or you may drive to Denver, so you have leakage. Well, when people are looking at coming into your community, if it costs more to fly here than maybe, Disney World or Yellowstone, you may fly someplace else. All this trickles through the system and is a cost and more or less a hidden cost to you as a community.
Well, I do realize that it's harder for us to land big conventions when it costs so much to get there from here. I also wonder about the funding sources we get and the support we get from the state. I look at Montana, where all my cousins live and everything, and we have Bozeman twice or 3 times as big as us. Billings, big, about the size of Sioux Falls, perhaps. Missoula, Great Falls, they've all got all these airports they support up there in Montana, yet they seem to get these funding projects done to build their parking ramps and everything. So I'm just curious, we need to investigate more of the kind of support we get from the state here, because we're supporting 2 airports. They're supporting 5 or 6. North Dakota's supporting 4 or 5. And maybe we need to have a little more emphasis coming from our people in Pierre to help us out. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to Lindsay Sechrist.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank you guys for bringing this to our attention. I think it's really helpful for us as a council to understand where you're at and to grasp some of the challenges. Our airport is obviously an economic driver for our entire region and critical infrastructure, and just cannot understate the importance of this project and getting through phase 1 and into phase 2. I also appreciate the innovative approach to solutions for some of the challenges you have with the phasing of the funding. I think that's helped me understand that some of the complexity of just understanding you're on a yearly cycle of funding phases. And so I do recognize the limitations there. It would be nice if we could be more efficient and find some additional funding source. But please let us know as a group what we can do to help with your communications when you're working with the state and federal representatives. We're here to support you. Thank you.
Anyone else? I have a quick question for Patrick. So emplanements, obviously a term of art. Is that the same thing as boardings, or is that, okay.
Yep.
So you're projecting over 1,000 a day in 2024. So 1,000 people coming into the airport, a like number coming in, arriving, correct? And so I noticed that we're a little cramped for parking. Is there any plans for parking expansion, or that is one of the revenue sources that you have, right?
Yes, sir. And I'll say I appreciate you guys approved our rates and charges on the parking increase that was there. Part of that parking increase. What I would tell you is that parking is our number 1 revenue source, far and away. And so as we look at, that allows us to keep costs down at the airport in various different ways, because we utilize the parking lot to subsidize other costs on the field. For instance, we try and buy the landing fee down with parking lot revenues. Now, that allows us to keep costs to the carriers lower. Part of what we're looking at is roughly a $600,000 increase in parking revenues in an effort to build additional surface lots today. There's a big difference between surface lots and parking garages. Surface lot costs have gone up, but so have parking garage costs. And if you look at Fargo and Sioux Falls have recently built parking garages to the tune of between 68 and 78 million, I believe, between the two of them. So we're doing what we can. We'll continue to. If you see, we're also wasting dirt from the terminal development over to parking lot number 3, which is currently being built into the teardrop shape of the land. We're starting to raise that area up as well. But the plan is that we're going to start design on the parking lot expansion for the second parking lot this year, because we spent most of the winter with over between 30 and upwards of 200 cars out of the confines of the paved lot. And usually you tend to go at 70%. The rule is to start adding parking lot. This year we've exploded to over 100% for a good majority of the winter. It wasn't even just a Christmas thing. It was a winter thing. So we're having to invest in that at the same time that we're also using a lot of our reserves to keep the Terminal Project 1 going as well. So we're working towards that, I promise.
So a parking garage or structure is pretty much not going to happen. Is it cost prohibitive for any time?
No, but we got to grow into that a little bit more. Okay. And I guess my philosophy is let's build as much surface parking lot as we can before we have to take that step.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion to acknowledge from Evans, second by Maher. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next, we'll go to consent items 2 through 10. I'm going to open public comment on consent items 2 through 10, and seeing no speaker request forms, I'm going to close public comment on 2 through 10. Then I think I need to we have to approve the minutes for the May 15th meeting. Motion to approve by Sechrist and a second by Evans. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Next item, we'll go to the mayor's office. I don't know who's going to handle that for confirm the appointments of reappointment of Peter Kappa and new appointment of Pat Burchell to the Opportunity Capture Fund.
Move to approve that.
Okay, move to approve by Sechrist and a second by Evans. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Then we'll go to the Finance Department. Director Ainsley, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For item number 4, we just have a individual that will be listed as a volunteer for our workman's compensation insurance. Item number 5 is our April 24 Treasury and General Fund update. Our total funds for the entire city is $216.2 million. 72% has been invested. Just would like to note that the undesignated cash balance in our general fund is actually negative $2 million. Doesn't mean that the entire general fund is negative, just that we are dipping into our reserves in the general fund. And usually what will end up occurring starting May, June, July, that's when we start receiving more inflows into our general fund with property taxes as well as increased sales tax. Item number 6 is our first quarter sales tax report for the year. I am happy to note that in our 2% general sales tax, we are 2.75% higher than last year. In our BBB or tourism sales tax fund, we are up 3.5%. So we are off to a good start. We are trending slightly lower than we had budgeted in the 2%, but I will note that actually the first check, at least for May's sales, were actually incredibly good. With that being said, item number 7 is kind of an odd item. It's a lease agreement that our community enrichment division prepares or oversees, I guess. This, I think it's important for the council to know, is not for the entire site. It's really some remaining right-of-way that the city leases. There's really only one potential user for it. Hubbard Lee. So it's not the entire site. It's really just a parking area. But if there are more specific questions, we do have our director here as well that she'll be able to answer any questions. Item number 8, property abatement. That is for an owner-occupied house. There was a mistake at the county level, and so the county has requested that you approve the abatement so it can be listed as an owner-occupied residence and receive a slightly lower tax bill. And then lastly, item number 9 is some equipment from the streets and snow removal departments, some equipment that they will be replacing. Are there any questions?
I think we'll go to, thank you, we'll go to Lindsay Sechrist.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Ainsley. I just had a quick question on item number 5 with the negative balance in the general fund. So year over year, it shows in one of the attachments that, looking at April of past years, we've never had a negative, and it was 3.9 or something negative last month, and now we're down to 2 million negative. But can you explain to me what we did different this year in budgeting that has now put us in the negative for this particular area? And it looked like we projected a 4% growth year over year. Am I correct in that with the general fund? That maybe we haven't reached? And I'll let Director Ainsley answer.
Go ahead.
Sure. That's a great question. In regards to that, we are using more of our general fund reserves than in this current budget year than we did in years past. We are anticipating using a little more than $5 million. And so that has increased the amount of money that is designated because of that. In addition, as the overall general fund has increased the expenditures, the reserve requirement increases. So even if the cash balance stays the same, our reserve requirement has increased, even though the amount of savings has not necessarily increased. So that's why it's negative. We do believe at the end of this month, we probably will not be in that situation. And again, it's not necessarily, it's not like an emergency or anything, but it is important to note that we do not have a surplus of savings to spend for new initiatives is really what that's about. That as we're proceeding this year, we have to be very careful about not doing new items that have not been budgeted, or if we do that, we have to find revenue to offset that. I will say, though, that's very important as you look at the budget for next year, is that we should not make use of as much undesignated cash as what we did this year. That's been an item that actually the mayor just talked with all the department directors about a couple hours ago, making sure we are being as efficient as possible to reduce some of our ongoing operating costs.
Thank you. I do imagine this has a little bit to do with the salary increases not being budgeted from last year into the general fund. And so I guess my point in all of this is just that we course correct and that in the future, maybe budget more realistically. And maybe that's a 2% increase year over year versus what we've estimated at 4%, that we're clearly not hitting that. And just so that we're realistic with our funding. Thank you.
Bill Evans, you're in the queue.
I would like to make a motion to approve items 4 through 8, removing 9 to be voted on separately.
Okay, I wanted to make a comment on 5 first before we go to a vote. I guess we have a second.
Second.
Okay, so I guess one comment I had for Director Ainsley, and I thank you for your counsel in that. But I noticed in the agenda item summary, you had mentioned that this is not really an emergency or anything like that, but you did say, and I quote, "It is imperative that the city seek to reduce the growth in the expenses within the general fund while increasing revenue growth." That's your advice to us, and I think that's good advice that we should heed. So we have a motion to approve 4 through 8. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And we'll go to Councilman Evans on number 9.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to delay this for maybe 2 weeks until we get a little more information on the process. And I would like to retain the floor after, if I get a second on this. Thank you.
Go ahead.
The reason I'm concerned is I brought this up 2 weeks ago when we approved all these auction items, and I asked, when is the auction going to be? When are they going to be held? How is it going to be advertised? Where do the proceeds go? Well, so I did a little math assignment here, and I went through all the items on this list that we're auctioning off as used surplus. There's really no description as to why they're surplus, but have they been replaced? Are they obsolete? Are they unrepairable? All these questions. But then I went online to different websites and I put together a list of the lowest bids I found on similar items the same year. For instance, a Sterling, and I understand Sterling is no longer in business. They were a conglomeration of, International Harvester and Daimler and Ford and everything else, and they went out of business after a few years, but I assume the parts are still available. The Sterling plow truck, some are being auctioned the same year for $15,000. The 2009 truck, as much as 33, as low as 33 and on up. The LT 500, there's no such device. I think it's either an 8500 or 7500, so I couldn't get anything on that. The Caterpillar grader, current ones are available that same vintage for $120,000, which is cheaper than a new one. The Sterling 2008, 54,000 was the bidding on that. The Caterpillar motor grader 2002. $107,000 they're being bid for right now online. Sterling model L7500, anywhere from $35,000 to $45,000. The John Deere 672, new between $158,000 and $183,000. Used, the cheapest I found was $130,000. Go down here, so it's about some $700,000 worth of stuff that if we got those bid prices for what we're selling at surplus, the money would go somewhere. So my questions for this are, where does that money go if we get them? How are they being bid? Are they being put on websites like govsurplus.com and all these other things? But the big question is, and I grew up around heavy equipment. I mean, my dad had me on a D9 tractor at age 5. I know you never pass the OSHA laws now, but that's the way it used to be when he was building the Minot Air Force Base and the Glasgow Air Force Base and all these highways and missile sites around here. So I know that the metal that makes these giant pieces of equipment doesn't change, and they get newer models and everything else. And I'm just curious why we get rid of equipment. Has this equipment been replaced? Do we no longer use it? Is it something that could not be repaired and be just as good as a new one because all of that metal costs money? So these are my questions, and I don't know if Mr. Tech could maybe answer some of these for me.
Dale, do you want to speak to that? I did notice yesterday in the Public Works meeting that Mr. Tech did explain some of this process to the Public Works Committee, but certainly would welcome any comments you have today.
I'll speak specifically to the items on this resolution. The Sterling trucks, parts are obsolete. Most of these trucks are used for snow plowing. We cannot even get wiper parts for the windshield, so the trucks are virtually useless in a snowstorm. I mean, that's one example of obsolescence that we can't work around. There are no aftermarket parts to fix that. All the salvage parts in the country we've scoured. So the Sterling trucks, that's what happens when we get low bid trucks, quite frankly. A lot of those parts are obsolete. We can't get them anymore. As far as the other equipment that's on there, our fleet maintenance facility works closely with streets. they're the ones that determine that this equipment is beyond us repairing and maintaining a reasonable cost to operate the equipment. And then lastly, I will say, I think we are listing all of these pieces of equipment on a auction site called Iron Planet. It is a national website. Talking to the representatives from Iron Planet, there's basically 3 different pools of equipment that you get. You get equipment that is scrap, you get equipment that people will buy and rebuild and resell, and then you get equipment that's just a year or 2 old that is really just a turnaround, say a construction company leased or bought equipment, used it for a job, and is turning around and selling it. We tend not to get things into the scrap value. We try to get rid of them, trade them in, auction them off, put that back in the budget for replacement equipment. And so all of these pieces of equipment fall clearly in that. We'll auction it off. Someone may buy it to rebuild it. Some small company might buy it to utilize it, but certainly our costs to keep these in service are beyond what we believe is reasonable.
Well, I appreciate that. I did do some investigation on that, and I want to do a little more before we approve this, because I know there's been some concern across the council about how we just continuously replace vehicles, and we prove these gigantic items that cost really millions of dollars, and yet we don't have money to fill a pothole out there. So the reason I suggested we delay this vote until I do a little more research on it and see what is actually going on, not that I think our people are trying to scam us, but I'm one that drives an F-150 that's got 290,000 miles on it, and I plan on keeping it another 10 years. Now, I also keep a nice car for highways and everything, but day-to-day operations, sometimes I wonder if we aren't getting rid of equipment a little too early, if it's not critical use. I could see making sure an ambulance is always really, really in great shape. You know, a snowplow that comes out 3 times, 4 times a year, I have a hard time justifying spending a lot of money to replace them at all early. So the reason I made this proposal that we delay this vote, just give a little more time to our process. We can find out if maybe we have some alternatives, and perhaps it won't be supported, but that's the reason I asked for this vote. So anyhow, that's my lecture.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go ahead, Dale.
If I may, I forgot to also mention, all this equipment sits outside, so it deteriorates sitting out in the sun.
So does my truck.
Yeah, the plows aren't just used for plow work in the wintertime. We also have boxes on them where we're hauling gravel in the summertime, so they do get used year round. We try not to have specific piece of equipment. Anytime we spec a piece of equipment, we want to make sure that we can use it year round. That is certainly the most cost-effective thing when procuring equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to continue for 2 weeks. There was a motion by Evans and a second by Bieberdorf. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay, it's 2-2, and so I will vote to continue it for 2 weeks. So the motion carries. Next item, go to the IT department.
Thank you. This is a request to purchase a piece of software that will be added to all of our endpoints. It's called Threat Locker. It is kind of an application and network firewall that we will be applying to our endpoints to make our security proposition just that much better for the city, because we see attacks through our endpoints on a daily basis, whether it be phishing or we've seen some denial of service lately. So we just want to make sure we secure the systems and the data that those systems hold as well as possible.
Move to approve.
Motion approved by Evans, second by Maher. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. That brings us to the end of the consent calendar. And now we'll go to non-consent items. I'm going to open public comment on the non-consent items, and seeing no speaker requests, I'm going to close public comment on non-consent. Then we'll go back to Finance Director Daniel Ainsley for number 11, approve resolution number 2024-045, a resolution to authorize salary adjustments for non-union benefited employees in 2024.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This item is just an annual inflationary increase. We now have gotten to the point that we have negotiated the annual inflationary increase for all of the union, various union employees, and so the last up are the non-union. Essentially, all that is being proposed is that the wages would increase in accordance to the Midwest urban CPI. That has been an increase of 2.8% from April of last year till April of this year. I think it's important to note, if anyone remembers, that is different than what was granted to AFSCME employees. The reason for that is the AFSCME wages were actually adjusted in January of this year, when they are retroactively back to January of this year. When that was done, that was actually for November. And so it was the inflationary increase that they are receiving in July is not for a full 12 months. And so that's why it's lower. I just want to make sure everyone's fully aware and that we're 100% transparent with that. And so it would be a 2.8% increase. That's the same as what PD is also receiving in July. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Daniel. We'll go to Lindsay Sechrist.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question. I think it alluded to in the summary, I didn't bring my laptop to check this, but alluded to future union increase following this. Could you please clarify that? Because we just sent through the new AFSCME wage scale, including the increase. And so I understand this is kind of following up on that for the non-union.
Mm-hmm.
But why would we see another wage increase request for the union come through? Thank you.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you. That also is a great question. I'm sorry, I probably should have been a little clearer when I described that. So it would not be a further wage adjustment. Instead, it would be a supplemental appropriation to fund that. And so the council has approved those, but those were not included in the budget. The reason those were not included in the budget is because we hadn't completed negotiations, and we didn't want to include a certain dollar figure that in essence would have ended up becoming the floor of what was requested. And so there was no increase included in the budget. So there will be a supplemental appropriation that we'll be asking the council for next month, should this go through, to fund the AFSCME as well as the non-union.
Oh, I see. So we've already approved the wage
yeah.
adjustment.
Correct.
I gotcha. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Motion to approve by Bieberdorf, second by Maher. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I have a comment to make.
You've got 3 minutes then to make a comment.
All right. I went on a webinar just before I came here. In fact, I had to leave it early to get to the meeting. GoRail.com. I don't know if anybody else from our entire city government was on it, but it's part of a $66 billion allocation, of which $3 billion is allocated specifically for crossing elimination problems, which we have a lot of here in Rapid City. And so I hope somebody else within the city government was in attendance. I couldn't tell. There were 500 people nationwide, but I didn't have a list of who was on there. They case studied Franklin Park, Illinois, right outside O'Hare Airport, where they have major problems with trains blocking because of all the distribution that comes from the airport into the Chicago area. And it was quite thorough, and I think we can get a rebroadcast, they said, of the webinar to send out to our employees. But I think it's critical we start looking at some of these monies. 20% of the entire budget is set aside for rural and tribal areas. And It's right in our wheelhouse in terms of acquiring money to do some of these things that we need to do in terms of emergency response and crossing. I also researched what Reno did in the early 2000s up until recently when they buried their entire rail line through the city down 20 feet. So they got rid of all the crossing problems and didn't change the rail service at all. But now they have no more problems. So it's going to be interesting to see if we investigate this, if we can perhaps become part of this program and get some money to help solve our problems, because obviously we have them. Now, I originally went on there thinking quiet zone monies. Evidently, that's a different program, and they're thinking of having another webinar in the near future concerning that, but we've talked about no money being available for that particular project either, and we need to get somebody on that, and I'd certainly be willing to be heading up a city task force, whatever, that we can investigate these funding opportunities for these things to solve these problems that just seem to be ongoing month after year after decade, and we never seem to solve them. So I just wanted to bring that up, that hopefully I'll get some people that are also interested in exploring it with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Sechrist, second by Maher to adjourn. All in favor? Motion carries. We're adjourned.
I'm so sorry my research bores you.
Not just me.
Well, that's the problem with this.